Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Screeny. You know that we just can't get enough of that lovable bald-headed TV doc here at the Screeny? When it comes to Dr. Phil, no one knows their stuff as well as we do. We've seen the good, the bad, and the completely ridiculous, and we're not ashamed to say that we are utterly addicted. This time around, we've unearthed some utterly savage moments where the tables have turned, and the doc has got a taste of his own medicine. From out-of-control guests taking over the conversations to some downright disrespectful doozies. Join us as we take a look at every time Dr. Phil got owned by guests. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos about your favorite movies and TV shows. DMX'S Child Support Fight Back. When celebrity guests appear on the show, it's going to go one of two ways. A, they're going to get so messed up that they'll be too defensive for the interview to go right. As soon as the doc brings up a sensitive subject, they'll be offended and storm off stage. We've seen that one happen plenty, haven't we, Nicholas Brendan? Or it'll be a pretty decent conversation. Rapper DMX probably had one of the most successful celebrity appearances on the show, as he didn't shy away from any line of questioning. The music mogul had a good rapport with the audience, so when things got a little awkward, he was able to laugh it off with them. You could tell that McGraw likes DMX too, so there was a good banter going on between them. However, Phil is there to get to the bottom of things, so we started asking questions about the $1.3 million worth of unpaid child support X had managed to rack up. The musician wasn't about to let that sit through and quickly rebuffed that by telling the doc that it's only that high because he was making $13 million a year at that point. When Phil dug a little deeper into that line of questioning, X straight up told him that it made no sense. He wasn't wrong either. Phil was clearly embarrassed and needed to regroup, so he cut to a commercial break. Make-up mistake. Dr. Phil had little control over these two feisty sisters, who appeared on the show to discuss their anger issues. One was trying to explain an incident that happened in a nail salon where her sister lost her temper unnecessarily, but the other sister wasn't about to take that lying down and began yelling over her sibling and Dr. Phil. Phil was being eliminated from the conversation entirely, so he cut in to show a segment where he secretly filmed them backstage. As neurotic Nancy was getting her hair done, she completely laid into the stylists employed by Dr. Phil to get her stage ready. She wasn't happy with everything from her makeup to the way her hair was done, and made sure the artists knew about it, completely bulldozing them and tearing down their work. Sometimes, it's not just Phil that gets owned, but its production staff too. It was quite an impressive rant that didn't paint this guest in a good light at all. And if anything was highlighted, it was her serious anger issues. Why you mad? One young woman went on the Dr. Phil show at the request of her family, who wanted her to clean up her life and her attitude. Some people really don't like it when they're confronted with their list of wrongs, and according to this guest, she wanted to be seen as what she really was. So much more than just a drug addict who steals cars. Well, that seems like a pretty important personality trait to us. When the doc asked her why she seemed so visibly riled up, the young woman gave the most savage response ever, telling him that she was mad at herself for agreeing to do the whole show in the first place, as she's just been attacked and nothing more. Ouch, that one must have hurt. It's a pretty rude thing to do, but you have to admit that this girl has balls for telling Dr. Phil to his face that everything about his show is pretty awful, and she would rather be anywhere else but there. Monster-in-law. When relationships between moms and kids break down, it's really sad, especially when it has something to do with the mom not liking their daughter-in-law. The doc has seen a few of these in his time, and almost everyone has been rude and disrespectful, but none more so than this crackpot. If you agree to go on the Dr. Phil show, then you have to go on stage knowing that you're going to get your butt handed to you by the finest TV therapist in the biz, right? This woman wasn't going to have any of it though, and as Dr. Phil tried to analyze her, she rolled her eyes and basically told him that what he was saying was complete rubbish. After all, he didn't have a clue what it was like to be like her. Mommy Dearest wasn't even interested in listening to Dr. Phil, but instead spoke to the audience, telling him that her son was not the person they were all seeing. McGraw desperately tried to claw back the conversation, but it was a little too late for it to swing back his way. How can it really get better when someone has told you you're talking crap? Nice try though, Doc. Sister. It doesn't necessarily take someone calling out Dr. Phil to his face to completely own him. Sometimes guests kicking off despite his warnings can be just as embarrassing for TV's favorite medical professional. One woman went on the show to air her differences with her soon-to-be mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and it was hell in a handbasket from the get-go. Marissa was foaming at the mouth waiting for the opposite guest to come out from backstage, and was fully backed up by her mother. When the doc tried to shut Marissa down, her mom intervened and said that as much as she respected Phil, she was going to do what her babies wanted to do even more. That told you, Phil. McGraw did manage to get some control over the situation for a minute. That was until the fiancé came bursting out onto the stage ready to kick some ass. Phil schooled her a little bit on how he expected her to conduct herself, and she smiled and agreed, before instantly disrespecting him and telling Marissa to suck it up with a few cuss words thrown in. This was TV gold. Furious Flasher. Exposing yourself to anyone is a massive no-no. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. Although most of us learn to keep our clothes on in public from an early age, one guy just couldn't stop flashing his privates to poor unsuspecting women. This troubled gent went on to the show to talk about his behavior, but wasn't overly impressed with the way he was being treated by everyone involved. The flasher was instantly annoyed by Phil's line of questioning and started telling him what he should have been asking, getting more and more irate as the segment went on. When Phil cut to a commercial break, he got out of his seat and proceeded to rip him a new one in footage that was shot between takes. Phil tried to talk to him about his condition, but he angrily told him that unless you'd been through it, then he couldn't comment on it at all. Which pretty much defeats the entire premise of the Dr. Phil show, to be honest. Despite Phil telling his guests he knows what it's like, he really doesn't. Or does he? Phil undoubtedly has some skeletons in his closet that just haven't hit the headlines yet, but then enraged by the audience's response, the guest accused them of laughing at him and creating a spectacle out of him. Again, he's not entirely wrong. BUMFIGHTS fights back. They say that imitation is the biggest form of flattery, but Dr. Phil doesn't take it that way. The producer of a web series that pits homeless people against each other in fights appeared on the show to, well, we don't really know why he was on the show, but the doc must have had a reason. The guy clearly wasn't there to have a lovely heart-to-heart, but instead turned up to be set-dressed as Dr. Phil, complete with the bald head and suit and tie. It was hilarious, but the burns didn't stop there. The doc asked the producer to leave the stage before the conversation could even get started, telling him that the way he exploited homeless people was disgusting. But that's when the producer threw down the gauntlet and accused Phil of doing the exact same thing. The funniest thing is, he isn't wrong. After all, Phil McGraw has made millions and millions from his show based on the problems that other people have. The big man had almost nothing to say in response, and didn't even try to defend himself from the allegations, instead booting the producer off the stage entirely. Cannibal John. Indifference can be pretty embarrassing, but so can persistence. John appeared as a guest on the show because he had some seriously worrying behaviors going on. He admitted to eating chunks of his own flesh, drinking his friend's blood, cornering his sister and her child with a knife, and fantasizing about chopping someone's head off. Phil reeled off this long list of truly terrifying accusations, but John just admitted to it all, taking it all in his stride and hardly batting an eyelid as he discussed it. What's more embarrassing here is that Phil desperately trying to get a reaction from his guest and just couldn't get it. How was Phil owned, you asked? Well, His producers probably thought that he hit solid gold by getting this psycho on board, but the payout was next to nothing. It was like having a statue on the stage. John was clearly laughing at the doc, and he proudly exclaims that it was all like a big joke to him. We must have missed the funny part. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and don't forget to check out one of the other 2 videos on your screen.